Hello everyone on the channel. Today's video is a summary and update on the Diddy case, the most disturbing case in the music industry of all. I hope you like it. If you want more, comment. The Sean Diddy Combs case, power, abuse and justice in the entertainment industry. In one of the most impactful and highly publicized criminal cases in recent entertainment history, hip-hop mogul Sean Diddy Combs faces extremely serious federal charges in the United States. The trial, which captures global attention and dominates international headlines, began on May 5, 2025, at the Federal District Court in Manhattan, New York, under intense scrutiny from the media and the public. The federal nature of the charges underscores not only the seriousness of the alleged crimes, but also their interstate reach and the complexity of the investigation that extended for more than 2 years before culminating in a formal indictment. The United States Department of Justice, through its Organized Crime and Human Trafficking Division, is leading the prosecution against one of the most influential figures in American music over the past 3 decades. The charges include racketeering, conspiracy under the RICO Act, Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, sex trafficking, transportation for prostitution, narcotics distribution, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. This is not just another celebrity scandal. It's a case that promises to redefine how we view power, influence, and systematic abuse in the entertainment industry. The Combs case represents a reckoning moment for an industry frequently criticized for protecting powerful figures at the expense of vulnerable victims. As the world watches, the ramifications of this trial promise to extend far beyond the career of a single man, potentially exposing networks of complicity and silence that permeate Hollywood and the music industry. Rise to power, the building of the Diddy empire. Before examining the charges, it's fundamental to understand the trajectory that led Sean Combs to become one of the most powerful figures in the entertainment industry. Born in Harlem on November 4, 1969, and raised in Mount Vernon, New York, Combs built a multifaceted empire that transcended music. His career began as an intern at Uptown Records in 1990, where he quickly rose to talent director. In 1993, after being fired from Uptown, he founded Bad Boy Records, which would become one of the most influential hip-hop labels, launching artists such as the notorious B.I.G., Faith Evans, Mace, 112, and later, Cassie Ventura herself. Combs' empire expanded to include Sean John, award-winning clothing brand launched in 1998. Combs Enterprises, business conglomerate with investments in media, fashion, and alcoholic beverages. Revolt TV, television channel, focused on music and hip-hop culture. Stake in Ciroc Vodka, partnership with Diageo that transformed the brand into a market leader. De Leon Tequila, premium tequila brand acquired in partnership with Diageo Film and Television Productions. Including award-winning documentaries and reality shows, at his peak, Combs' fortune was estimated by Forbes at approximately $740 million, making him one of the wealthiest musicians in the world. This vast wealth and influence, according to the prosecution, allegedly facilitated the creation of an abuse system protected by a network of employees, security personnel, and facilitators. Combs also carefully cultivated his public image as a philanthropist and mentor, establishing the Sean Combs Foundation in 1995, which offered scholarships and educational opportunities for disadvantaged youth. This duality between his benevolent public persona and the allegations of systematic abuse forms the complex backdrop of this case. Details of the charges. The charges against Combs, detailed in a 14-page document presented by the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York, span an extensive period of more than 2 decades, from 1998 to 2024, painting a disturbing picture of a systematic pattern of coercive and illegal behavior, RICO conspiracy and organized criminal structure. According to federal prosecutors, Combs used the structure of his vast business empire, including Bad Boy Records, Sean John, Combs Enterprises, and other entities, as a front to operate a sophisticated network of sexual exploitation and human trafficking. The indictment alleges that this organization functioned as a criminal enterprise under the terms of the RICO Act, originally created to combat traditional organized crime. The prosecution describes a clear hierarchy within this organization. Combs, at the top of the pyramid, directing all operations, trusted executives, managing financial and logistical aspects, security personnel, and personal assistants, facilitating and concealing illicit activities, doctors and drug suppliers, providing substances. For control of victims, prosecutors presented evidence of electronic communications, financial transfers, and testimonies suggesting a meticulously organized system to identify, recruit, control, and exploit vulnerable victims. Sex trafficking and exploitation. It is alleged that Combs attracted young and vulnerable women with the promise of opportunities in the entertainment industry, financial involvement, or romantic relationships, only to later manipulate them and subject them to violent, non-consensual, and frequently drug-induced sexual activities. The indictment details a consistent pattern: recruitment, identification of potential victims in clubs, industry events, or through social media isolation, separation of victims from their support networks through exclusive contracts, geographic relocation, or financial dependence, induction to chemical dependency, systematic supply of drugs to create dependency and facilitate control coercion, use of physical violence, threats, blackmail with compromising recordings, and intimidation, commercial exploitation, utilization of victims in music productions, promotional events, and commercial sexual activities. The freak-offs, events called freak-offs, are described as central to this exploitation network. According to the prosecution, these were elaborate sexual encounters organized at Combs' properties in Los Angeles, Miami, New York, and the Bahamas, where illicit drugs such as cocaine, methamphetamine, MDMA, GHB, and oxycodone were allegedly distributed to facilitate sexual abuse and coercion. The indictment alleges that these events followed a specific pattern, duration of several days, often in hotel suites or private mansions, presence of hired male sex workers, non-consensual filming of activities, forced administration of drugs to ensure participation, physical violence against participants who tried to resist or leave. Court documents indicate that the prosecution possesses more than 70 hours of recordings of these events, obtained through searches of Combs' properties and seized electronic devices. Interstate transportation for prostitution. The federal charges of sex trafficking and transportation imply that individuals were transported across state lines for purposes of sexual exploitation, violating the Mann Act, federal legislation that prohibits the transportation of persons across state lines for prostitution or illegal sexual activities. The indictment details at least 17 specific incidents between 2009 and 2023, where Combs allegedly organized and financed the transportation of victims across state lines for participation in commercial sexual activities, frequently using private jets to avoid detection, narcotics distribution, and money laundering. In addition to charges related to sexual exploitation, Combs faces charges of distribution of controlled substances and money laundering. Prosecutors allege that he maintained a network of drug suppliers who stocked his events and were used to control victims. The indictment details an elaborate money laundering scheme where proceeds from illicit activities were allegedly channeled through shell companies, real estate investments, and cryptocurrency transactions to conceal their origin. Seized financial records indicate suspicious movements of more than $45 million over a 5-year period. Cassie Ventura's testimony. Cassandra, Cassie Ventura, Combs' longtime ex-girlfriend and former Bad Boy Records artist, emerged as a crucial witness for the prosecution. Her testimony, which lasted 4 full days, details a decade of alleged physical, emotional, sexual, and psychological abuse, providing the jury with an intimate view of the dynamics of power and control that allegedly characterized Combs' behavior. The asymmetrical power relationship. Cassie met Diddy when she was just 19 and he was 37. She was an artist at the beginning of her career. He was one of the most powerful men in music. During her testimony, Cassie described how this power disparity was fundamental to the cycle of abuse. He controlled every aspect of my life, my career, my appearance, who I could talk to. When you're 19 and someone with so much power shows interest in you, it's easy to confuse control with care and obsession with love. Cassie described how Combs allegedly deliberately sabotaged her music career, cancelling releases, preventing collaborations with other artists, and limiting her professional opportunities to keep her financially dependent on him. The freak-offs and sexual abuse. In her testimony, Cassie provided disturbing details about the freak-offs organized by Combs. She described incidents of coercion to participate in orgies with hired male sex workers, many of which were allegedly recorded without her consent. He would drug me until I could barely stay conscious. When I resisted, he would physically assault me. Afterward, he would use the recordings to threaten me, saying he would ruin my career if I told anyone. Cassie also reported that Combs frequently forced her to take substances such as GHB, ketamine, and MDMA to facilitate these encounters, often resulting in blackouts and periods of time she has no memory of. Physical violence and intimidation. One of the most impactful aspects of Cassie's testimony was her detailed description of physical violence. She reported multiple incidents of assault, including punches, kicks, strangulation, and throwing objects. In a particularly severe incident in 2016, she described how Combs allegedly kicked, stomped on, and dragged her through a hotel corridor in Los Angeles, an event that was later corroborated by security footage admitted as evidence in the trial. Cassie also reported direct threats against her and third parties, including rapper Kid Cudi, with whom she had a brief relationship during a temporary separation from Combs. She mentioned an incident where Kid Cudi's car allegedly exploded following threats from Combs, an allegation that Kid Cudi later publicly confirmed in a statement to CNN. He told me he had people everywhere, that nobody would believe me, and that if I spoke up, something would happen to me or my family. I believed him because I saw what he was capable of. Psychological impact and escape attempts. During her testimony, Cassie described the profound psychological impact of the abuse, including suicidal thoughts, post-traumatic stress disorder, severe depression, and eating disorders. She reported multiple attempts to leave the relationship, only to be lured back through a combination of promises, threats, and emotional manipulation, a pattern that domestic violence experts identify as characteristic of abusive relationships. He alternated between extreme violence and extreme generosity. One day he would beat me until I could barely walk. The next day he would give me a new car or expensive jewelry and promise it would never happen again. Although Cassie reached a $30 million civil settlement with Combs in November 2023 to resolve her own lawsuit for rape and abuse, her testimony in the criminal trial is independent of that agreement and focuses on the alleged criminal acts that have relevance to the federal charges. Corroboration and evidence. The credibility of Cassie's testimony was significantly reinforced by physical evidence and corroborative testimonies. The 2016 security video, showing Combs physically assaulting Cassie in a hotel, was admitted as evidence in the trial, despite protests from the defense medical records, documenting injuries consistent with physical abuse. Hotel staff testimonies, confirming incidents of disturbance and property damage, phone records and text messages, revealing patterns of control and threats. Former employees' testimonies, confirming aspects of Combs' controlling and abusive behavior. The combination of Cassie's detailed testimony with this corroborative evidence represents a significant challenge for Combs' defense. Other victims and witnesses. In addition to Cassie Ventura, the prosecution presented testimonies from several other women who claim to have been victims of Combs, establishing a pattern of behavior that extends over more than 2 decades. These witnesses include former Bad Boy Records artists, models, personal assistants, and women whom Combs met in social contexts. Consistent patterns of abuse. The witnesses described remarkably similar experiences, despite having come into contact with Combs in different periods and contexts. Jane Doe, Marpa 1, former model who alleges she was drugged and sexually assaulted by Combs in 2003 after a New York Fashion Week event. Jane Doe, Narrated 2, former Bad Boy Records artist, who testified about being forced to participate in freak-offs as a condition for the release of her music between 2005-2009. Jane Doe, narrated 3, former personal assistant who worked for Combs from 2008 to 2012 and testified about facilitating sexual encounters and delivering payments to victims. Jane Doe were a 4 woman who met Combs at a club in Miami in 2018 and alleges she was drugged and trafficked to a private event. The consistency in the descriptions of methods of control, isolation, and abuse significantly strengthens the prosecution's case, establishing that the alleged behavior was not incidental but part of a deliberate and organized system. Former employees' testimonies. Former Combs employees also provided crucial testimonies, describing their role in facilitating and covering up the alleged activities. Former personal security testified about organizing transportation for victims across state lines and administering confidentiality agreements under coercion. Former executive assistant described the organization of cash payments to victims and the acquisition of drugs for the freak-offs. Former private jet pilot provided flight records and testimony about the transportation of young women to Combs properties in different states. These testimonies are particularly significant for establishing the organized nature of the alleged activities, a crucial element for the charges under the RICO Act. Expert testimonies. The prosecution also presented expert testimonies to contextualize and explain aspects of the case. Psychologist specialized in trauma explained how coercive control and psychological manipulation can prevent victims from leaving abusive relationships. Human trafficking expert described how high-profile industries like entertainment can facilitate exploitation due to power imbalances. Forensic toxicologist testified about the effects of drugs such as GHB and ketamine on the capacity for consent. Financial analyst presented evidence of financial transaction patterns consistent with money laundering and payments to victims. These expert testimonies help the jury understand the complexity of the case and contextualize behaviors that might seem counterintuitive, such as victims returning to an abuser or not reporting crimes immediately. Combs' defense. Sean Combs' defense team, led by renowned criminal attorneys Mark Agnifilo and Tenny Garagos, adopts a multifaceted strategy that seeks to recontextualize the events described by the prosecution and question the credibility of the witnesses and the legality of the evidence. Consent as a central argument. While admitting that Combs may have had explosive behaviors or participated in an unconventional lifestyle, they vehemently argue that all relationships and sexual activities were consensual among adults. During the cross-examination of Cassie Ventura, Agnifilo questioned, "Ms. Ventura, isn't it true that you voluntarily continued this relationship for more than a decade, accepting expensive gifts, luxurious trips, and career opportunities? Isn't it true that you could have left at any time?" The defense attempts to present Combs' lifestyle and that of his associates as one of swingers, or adults who consented to participate in group sexual activities, contrasting this with the narrative of coercion and trafficking presented by the prosecution. Questioning witness credibility. A central pillar of the defense is challenging the credibility of the accusers, suggesting that their motivations are financial or based on resentment over professional failures. They point to civil settlements, such as Cassie's, as evidence of seeking money instead of genuine justice. During the trial, Agnifilo argued, "These are women who voluntarily associated with Mr. Combs for years, benefiting from his fame and generosity. Only when these relationships ended and financial opportunities arose did these allegations come to light." The defense also highlighted inconsistencies in testimonies and the absence of contemporaneous reports of the alleged events, suggesting that the accusations were fabricated or retrospectively exaggerated. Contesting evidence. The defense vigorously contested the admissibility of various pieces of evidence, including the security video, arguing that it could inflame the jury and divert attention from the central charges, electronic communications, questioning the authenticity and context of text messages and email search evidence, alleging that the search warrants were excessively broad and violated the Fourth Amendment. In a particularly significant pre-trial motion, the defense argued that the simultaneous searches of Combs' properties constituted an illegal fishing expedition designed to find evidence of crimes not specified in the original warrants. Cultural contextualization. The defense also attempts to contextualize Combs' behavior within hip-hop culture and the entertainment industry, suggesting that certain behaviors, while potentially offensive to some, are normalized in these environments. During the opening argument, Geragos stated, "Mr. Combs is an artist, a visionary whose lifestyle may not conform to conventional norms. The entertainment industry has its own rules and dynamics that may seem strange to outsiders." This line of defense seeks to normalize behaviors that might appear coercive or exploitative in other contexts. Strategy of dividing the charges. The defense adopted a strategy of trying to separate the different charges, arguing that even if the jury believes some inappropriate behaviors occurred, this does not constitute the specific crimes of sex trafficking or RICO conspiracy. Agnifilo argued, even if you believe that Mr. Combs acted inappropriately on certain occasions, this does not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he operated a criminal enterprise or engaged in sex trafficking as defined by federal law. Combs has pleaded not guilty to all charges, and the defense maintains that he is the victim of a defamation campaign orchestrated by resentful former associates and opportunists. The burden of proof rests on the prosecution to prove Combs's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Legal development and investigation. The case against Sean Combs represents the culmination of a complex and multifaceted federal investigation that developed over several years, involving multiple federal and state agencies. Origins of the investigation. The federal investigation of Combs initially began in 2022, following multiple victim reports to local authorities in Los Angeles, Miami, and New York. These individual reports, initially treated as separate cases, began to reveal similar patterns that eventually attracted the attention of federal authorities. The case gained significant momentum in November 2023, when Cassie Ventura filed her civil lawsuit against Combs, detailing allegations of abuse that extended over more than a decade. Although this case was quickly resolved with an out-of-court settlement, the detailed allegations in the lawsuit served as a catalyst to intensify the ongoing federal investigation. Coordinated operation. The case gained major public visibility. In September 2024, when Sean Combs was arrested following a long-standing federal investigation. This investigation, conducted by an interagency task force including Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, Internal Revenue Service, IRS, Criminal Investigation Division, Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, the operation culminated in simultaneous and highly publicized searches of Combs' properties in Los Angeles, Miami, and New York. More than 100 federal agents participated in the coordinated searches, which were meticulously planned to occur simultaneously to prevent the destruction of evidence. Evidence collection. The searches aimed to collect evidence, including electronic devices and documents related to the allegations. The operation resulted in the seizure of an impressive volume of potentially incriminating material. Approximately 96 electronic devices, including cell phones, laptops, tablets, and external hard drives, extensive cloud records, totaling about 90 terabytes of digital data, physical documents, including contracts, confidentiality agreements, and financial records-controlled substances. Significant quantities of illicit drugs found in safes, video recordings, more than 1,000 hours of recordings, including material from the alleged freak-offs. According to court documents, the forensic analysis of these materials revealed substantial evidence of activities consistent with the charges, including explicit communications about victim recruitment, event organization, drug distribution, and attempts to cover up these activities. Formal indictment process. The arrest followed a formal indictment by a federal grand jury, which considered there to be sufficient evidence to bring the case to trial after hearing testimony from more than 30 witnesses and reviewing substantial evidence. Combs remains in federal custody since his arrest, after having been denied bail on multiple occasions. The presiding judge, Honra Arun Subramanian, cited the substantial risk of obstruction of justice and danger to potential witnesses as reasons for denying release, even with the defense's offer of a $50 million bail and house arrest with electronic monitoring. Procedural challenges. Combs' defense team contested various procedural aspects of the case, including allegations of undue delays in the discovery process, arguing that the prosecution withheld potentially exculpatory evidence, questions about the legality of search and seizure warrants, alleging they were excessively broad motions to suppress evidence, particularly related to privileged communications between Combs and his attorneys, requests for change of venue, arguing that the intense media coverage in New York prejudiced the possibility of an impartial jury. These procedural challenges are common strategies in high-profile criminal cases, seeking to identify possible procedural flaws that could benefit the defense or establish grounds for future appeals. Impact on the entertainment industry. The charges against Sean Combs and the subsequent trial had a seismic impact on the entertainment industry, prompting a re-evaluation of practices, power relationships, and corporate responsibilities. Rupture of commercial partnerships. Various high-profile commercial partnerships were abruptly terminated, including Diageo ended its lucrative partnership with Combs related to Ciroc vodka and De Leon tequila, valued at hundreds of millions of dollars. Macy's removed the Sean John clothing line from its stores. Revolt TV. Combs was forced to sell his stake in the television network he himself founded, Apple Music, cancelled a planned documentary about the history of Bad Boy Records music distributors. Several platforms significantly reduced the promotion of music associated with Combs. These ruptures represent not only significant financial losses for Combs, but also a signal of change in corporate policies related to public figures accused of misconduct.